Hello everyone, my name is John Bussart. I'm an HPE Solution Center Engineer for Ingram Micro. I help support servers, blade systems, storage, as well as networking technology solutions from HPE. In my videos, what I like to do is show you a slide from a popular PowerPoint and then present to you what that means within a management interface. Today we're going to continue on our discussion with HPE's composable solution called Synergy. So certainly Synergy looks like and certainly can act like a traditional blade system, but once we add on or layer on our layers of composability, it becomes a pool of resources, that is compute, storage, as well as networking resources that we could draw from in order to create services and applications within our environment. Today we're going to focus in on the Synergy Composer, which is an appliance that can either go in appliance bay 1 or 2 within a Synergy frame, what we used to call an enclosure. Right, now I'll need 2 Synergy Composer appliances per Synergy stack or logical stack within an environment. What do I mean by logical stack? So I could have multiple Synergy frames all connected through the frame link module in the back of the enclosure, and I'd only need 2 composers in order to be able to manage the environment. So for example, I could have a Synergy Composer in the frame that was at the topmost of a rack and a redundant composer that was in the frame at the bottommost of the rack. So the Synergy Composer runs a specialized version of OneView tailored for the Synergy solution. All right, so with that being said, if you've seen OneView demonstrations, this should look similar. I'll point out some of the differences that you'd see within a Synergy environment as far as the OneView platform is concerned. So with that being said, let's explore this management interface. Okay, so I've already logged into my Synergy Composer. As you can see up here, it is labeled as OneView. Across the bottom, I have scheduled tasks. So if I was doing any firmware updates or backups of this appliance, it would show up down here. You can also see I have client alerts as well as active alerts. And I've got one warning that's showing up here. Let me show you what that is. I got a demonstration of proof of concept, and as I'd mentioned, you need 2 Synergy Composers with an environment to create a level of redundancy, and you can see appliance bay 1 is not configured for high availability. So let's explore what's going on here. So if I go back to the dashboard, I look at enclosures. This will be the front of the enclosure up here, and you can see I have 1 Synergy Composer here. But in the secondary appliance bay, I have an image streamer. So I'm going to save the image streamer as well as the D3940 storage module for another video. And we're just going to focus in on the Synergy Composer. This is a proof of concept setup. Right? I have it available just to be able to show you guys just the different capabilities of the solution. Up here, we have some compute modules, or what we used to call blade servers. I could certainly look at the context of those by clicking on them, or I could go over here back to the dashboard and select server hardware, and then we could see both of these compute modules, one in bay 1 and one in bay 2. Something that is a little bit different between these, you see one of them has a server profile assigned to them and the other one does not. All right, so we'll explore server profiles in a little bit. So some of the things I could do from this context, certainly I can reach into the remote KVM features or the graphical user interface by launching the console. So this is a direct link into the ILO chip. And I can interact with this system like I was local inside the environment. Some other things I can do, I can look at utilization, such as CPU utilization, power utilization, or a variety of things. I can look at the interconnect mapping of these components within this environment. All right, so let's go back to the dashboard. We'll go back to our enclosure as well. So if you're familiar with blade systems, you'll know that the compute modules, or the blade servers, generally come with 2 dual port adapters inside the environment. And if you put an adapter in there, right, one of those ports will go to the left side interconnect module and one will go to the right side interconnect module. All right, so if you don't know blade systems so well, when you look at these compute modules or these blade servers, there's no actual physical ports for network as well as storage resources in the environment. They actually pass through the enclosure and out the back of interconnect modules. If you look down here at the rear view of the enclosure, you'll see the interconnect modules in the back. And again, if you're familiar with blade systems, you'll know there'll be a right and a left interconnect module. The same concept exists, except it's going to be a top and a bottom interconnect module. So up here I have a top, and this is done mainly for redundancy. And each one of these interconnect modules go to different ports on the controller cards that you put inside your system. So at the top, since I have the storage module here, I have a SAS module in the back. And there's its redundant one down here. I also have virtual connect modules. We'll talk about what virtual connect is. I would say that if you're going down the path of composability, I'd say one of the ways to be able to pull from your pool of resources is by using virtual connect. This will be your first step to creating a fully composable environment, is by using the virtual connect modules. All right, and we can look at a little bit more detail on those modules. Again, if you go to the dashboard and I select interconnects. What I have selected right now is one of the virtual connect modules. And I could look at information on these guys, such as port utilization. All right, so we look at schedule task, appliance alerts, we talked about the enclosure, we talked about the hardware, interconnects. Now we have these logical entities here. As I mentioned, through the frame link module in the back, and if we're looking at the line drawing, it'll be these guys. I have the ability to interlink these frames and manage them as a single entity or a single logical entity. So the idea is, as I grow my environment or add extra synergy frames, I don't want to reconfigure each one of those over and over again. I can just add them to the logical entity. I think the best way to kind of look at that or describe that is if I look at the logical interconnects. And again, I have the virtual interconnect selected here. I have these entities that, again, I could select as a part of a server profile. Again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Right? If I do, the information will flow through these ports on the back of the interconnect module. If I look at a little bit more detail, I'm going to click Edit. And then we'll look at this specific configuration. And then within this, you can see all my VLAN settings. So as I bring new enclosures as well as interconnects, I don't want to configure these all over and over again. I just add them to this logical entity. I'm going to click Cancel here. I'll click Cancel again. And then I'm going to go back to the dashboard. All right, so we look at schedule tasks, appliance alerts, look at the enclosure, server hardware, interconnects, as well as these logical entities. Now let's talk about the storage capabilities. So I certainly have storage pools over here as well as volumes over here. All right, so I have the ability to be able to add storage systems into my Synergy solution or within one view. And in my configuration, I have three power storage systems loaded up in this environment. I can get the different utilization between each of those. Now, if you've done 3PAR in the past, you might understand what CPGs are, but CPGs are just policies or storage pools for configuring RAID types as well as drive types. If I go back to the dashboard, I can look at those storage pools over here. From that, I can then create volumes. Now certainly I got three PAR store service systems in there. I don't only have 2 volumes. These are just the volumes I chose to present by clicking add a volume. So I can add volumes from the 3PAR storage system if I wanted to. Right? Or I could create a brand new volume. Again, it'll reach into the 3PAR storage system and actually create that volume. There's a different way to do this. I could do this as part of a server profile again. So I'm going to show you that in a little bit. As another side note, I could go over to actions and actually create snapshots as well. So let's go back to the dashboard. So we've covered a lot of these topics already. So the only things that we really have left are blade bays, which is kind of self-explanatory, how many bays are populated. Right? And we have servers with profiles as well as server profiles. So what are server profiles? Well, server profiles are software-defined services that we pull from within our network. So I'm going to pull my pools of resources in my environment, again, compute, storage, and networking, and I'm going to aggregate them into something like a software-defined server within my environment. I'm going to assign those to systems. Right, we can see this one is assigned to Bay 2, so the compute module or blade server that's in Bay 2. It has 6 connections, and it's also connected to the SAN storage. So I think the best way to kind of look at this is actually to go in and edit it. Now this is a movable entity. This isn't necessarily nailed down to any particular system. I could choose different compute modules in order to be able to run this if I felt like it. And we'll explain that a little bit later on. But let's scroll on down and look at some other settings. So some of the differences, certainly there is an OS deployment server, and this would be the image streamer. Again, I'm going to save that for another video. I can also manage firmware within this environment. So if you're familiar with Service Pack for Reliance, those are an ISO that contains all the firmware and driver updates for an HP Reliance system. Right. And I can upload those into this composer or this OneView environment and then manage them. So for example, if I select this Service Pack for Reliant, I can do a firmware as well as driver update using smart update tools. And this is just a tool within the operating system that allows me to perform these updates. Right, so I can do the firmware and driver, I can just do the firmware, or I could select firmware only, which means the next time the server boots, right, it'll get that update or a boot from that ISO. Right? I want things to happen a little quicker here, and this adds a little bit to the boot time, so that's why I have it set for manage manually. I'm trying to show you something interesting here. If I go down a little bit further, you'll see that I have connections. So as I had mentioned, my blade system or my compute module has 2 20 gig Ethernet connections inside of them. Right? And it's a converged network adapter. In combination with Virtual Connect, I have the ability to carve out each one of these 20 gig adapters into 4 devices or 4 virtualized devices. They almost look like physical devices when you look inside the operating system of an environment. So in my environment, again, 2 20 gig connections, I have carved out 1, 2, 3, and 4 Ethernet connections, as well as 2 storage connections or 2 fiber connections, fiber channel over Ethernet to be specific. Right, and all that rides over 2 20 gig connections. It's not very difficult to make these carvings. And I could click add a connection, select my resource, maybe we'll do for VLAN 82, and click add. Now if you notice, it doesn't have a virtualized MAC address, or it doesn't have a MAC address right now. Right, when I boot this up, it'll grab a virtualized MAC address and assign it, and that'll become a movable entity, meaning I can move MAC addresses and worldwide names between compute modules. I'm going to remove that. If you look up, you'll see all these devices have MAC addresses as well as worldwide names associated. Again, these aren't nailed down to the compute module. I can pick up and make them portable within the environment. Now, if I want to look at this within the operating system, this server profile is associated to this system here. Let's go take a quick look. We'll open up Device Manager and expand out network adapters. We'll see I have 4 network adapters sitting here. If I go down to storage controllers, you'll see I have another 2 storage controllers. So a total of 6 devices, which is exactly what I have inside here. Other things I can do within a server profile, I can manage local storage. So if you want to have resources that are portable and movable, you won't necessarily want to manage the integrated storage controller, right? Because that'd be local hard drives within the blade system. You can do that if you wanted to. Right? There's also the ability to manage MES storage or composable storage from the D3940. Again, I'm going to save that for another video at another time. A little bit further down is SAN storage, so I have the ability to manage my 3-part storage systems from within this environment. And you can see that I have a 100 gig volume already presented in this environment. And if I go inside my system, I can open this up. You'll see there is that 100 gig volume. I can also add additional resources to this. So again, pulling from my pool of resources by clicking Add Volume. I can choose an existing volume, but I think this time I'm going to create a new volume. We're going to give it a name. Say it's our volume. We could use a template if we felt like it. I'm going to use one of my storage pools. Again, these are CPGs if you know what 3PAR is. And I'm going to select off my SSD drives. And I'm going to click Add. So I've added another 100 gig drive. I'm going to click OK one more time so it actually gets created and presented to the system. And it's going through the process of configuring that storage. It's already done. So I'm going to go over, I'm going to click Edit again to bring up that context. And we'll go down to storage again. You can see I have 200 gig drives now allocated. Now if I go inside the operating system, I'll go over to disk management. You'll see that that drive exists. So I'll take them and make that online. We'll initialize the disk. And of course we'll format that on out. Click Next and then Finish. Right, so again, I've pulled from my storage resources and I've added them into this environment. So other things I can manage, certainly I could manage boot mode, legacy or UEFI, boot order. Certainly the large settings that you can find within a BIOS can be edited. As well as some other advanced options. All right, and this is a software-defined entity, so this is movable because there's no local storage within those compute modules in the environment. All right, so if something catastrophic happened, so for example, I'll close this out. If the server failed, I could reassign those resources. So what I'm going to do in this case, go back over to the enclosure. I'm going to take the resource that's currently running on compute module 2 and move that over to 1. And it'll be the exact same system when I move it on over. Right? So again, failure happened here, I can move it on over. So let's go back over to the server profiles. Go under actions. Then I'm going to take and reassign this to day 1. And yes, we're going to reassign that. I'm going to click OK. And now we can see the process of it reassigning. So I'm going to take out a little bit of the dead space within this video. As always, you want to get a true an accurate representation of time. Look down below. I want to speed this up. I don't want to keep you here any longer than you have to be. Now, some things to look at is if you think about this as a pool of resources that we could pull from, right? I have this profile, server profile, not assigned necessarily anything, or it's set aside, right? So if, say, one of these blade solutions was being used by test and dev, right, I could turn to them and say, hey, my compute that was running my production level application has failed me. I need to park what you're using and use that to be able to get my application server back up and running. So again, I could reassign my resources based on what's driving business within my environment. Okay, the update is completed. So I'm going to go over, I'm going to launch the console. Right. I'm going to power on this compute module. I'll expand it on out a little bit. You can see it's starting to boot. Now if I go back over, I'll go back to the enclosure. You can see now that that profile is assigned to bay 1 instead of bay 2. Again, the system will boot up and it'll look like it's the same server. And it's going to go through a couple cycles of a boot process in order to be able to apply to that. You notice in the background, we're getting a little bit of notice that an error is happening with connections. That's because we're reassigning the virtual network connections from virtual connect from one bay to another, and we're seeing another message showing up over here. But this will disappear as the profile gets assigned. And now we're looking at our first reboot. Right after it goes through its storage configuration. And here we're getting our message about configuring the remote management software. So again, being configured by one view. You can already see it's starting to correct itself. Yep, there it is, all cleaned up. And the system will reboot shortly. Now we can see the operating system is starting to load. Now we're at a prompt where we can log in. You can see that we're working with the exact same system, and then we're getting the message about a crash. So just hard powered off this guy. But if we open this up, we can see that my storage is still assigned, so my resources are still assigned. The storage perspective, as well as from a networking perspective. So we look in here, we're seeing the same network adapters as well as storage controllers. And if we dug in deeper, we'd see the MAC addresses would be exactly the same. So I was able to reallocate these resources based on what was driving business. All right, so this is how to use composability within a Synergy environment. This is one of the ways to be able to allocate resources from a shared storage pool. I plan to show you how to allocate other resources in some other videos coming up. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please stay tuned for more videos.